The first iPhone revolutionized a decade of technology and changed the world in the process. Now, 10 years later, it is only fitting that we are here to reveal a product that will set the path for technology for the next decade.
Hey guys, this is Paul, and the iPhone X is the biggest change to the iPhone Apple has ever made. For their 10th anniversary of their smartphone, Apple's decided to make the display take up nearly the entire front of the phone. Also, the home button that has had its place in every iPhone ever created is nowhere to be found on the X. And in place of Touch ID, the phone now uses your face like a fingerprint to unlock the phone. So with all these changes, you might assume that the $1,000 iPhone X is the best iPhone out there. And in many ways, it is. But after using it for the past 2 months, I've decided that I would rather sell it and just go back to my old iPhone 7. Here's why. For the sake of this video, I'll avoid talking about all the minute details about the X that I'm sure you can find in hundreds of other videos, and I'll instead focus on some of the areas of the phone that I really personally don't like and where I believe Apple went wrong with the X. There are a lot of things I actually like about the X. The performance is incredible, I hardly notice any slowdown or lag when opening apps, and the screen is beautiful. It's Apple's first OLED screen on an iPhone, so colors are bright and vibrant, and it also has the highest pixel density of any iPhone, so it looks super sharp, definitely a noticeable improvement over my iPhone 7. And there's a lot more things that I like about the phone. So for the rest of this video, you can assume that if I don't mention some things, I'm either a fan of it or I just don't mind it enough to include it in this video. So with that being said, let's get into the real reasons I've decided to sell the iPhone X. Any video about the iPhone X would be incomplete without talking about the notch. The notch has been made fun of all over the place, and I think that's for a good reason. It does look really weird and out of place as it's right in the middle of an otherwise seamless display. It simply isn't very pleasing to the eye, and I'm still confused as to why Apple decided to include it. But here's the thing, 90% of the time that I'm using the X, I just forget about the notch altogether. But every now and then, there's an issue with the notch and software integration. So, for example, I remember when the X was first released, Instagram had this problem with their app where if you turn the volume up or down, the volume bar just went right through the notch, so you couldn't see what level the volume was set to. Thankfully, this issue was fixed very quickly, and because the notch is a software issue, it really will be the developer's job to fix things like this. But I think Apple could have saved the developers a lot of trouble and made a more visually appealing phone at the same time by just extending the notch over to the upper corners. But as I mentioned, I haven't actually noticed the notch too much during my usage, so it's not my main problem with the X. So Face ID. On paper, this sounds like a really amazing feature. The phone will literally scan your face in less than a second and determine whether or not it's you and unlock the phone. But given the choice between Touch ID and Face ID, I would have to go with Touch ID simply because it's normally much faster and easier to unlock the phone. Now, Face ID and Touch ID both have their ups and downs. For example, I know with Touch ID, there's special cases like if you're wearing gloves you can't unlock the phone, or if there's even just a little bit of moisture on your hands then the phone won't unlock. But there's way more special cases like this with Face ID that will prevent you from unlocking the phone. Right off the bat, I find it really annoying how you have to put your entire face right in front of the camera for it to work. So for instance, if your phone was lying flat on a table, you'd have to pick it up and stick it in front of your face to unlock it. Whereas with Touch ID, you could easily unlock it and leave your phone lying on the table. Ideally, I think Apple would have included both Face ID and Touch ID so you could kind of get the best of both worlds and use whatever is most convenient in different situations. But obviously there's reasons as to why Apple didn't do this. There's probably extremely limited space in the phone as it is, and it would undoubtedly cost a lot more, but I think that would have been pretty sweet and it would have made unlocking the phone so much easier. Samsung and LG both have fingerprint scanners on the back of their flagship phones, so I think that if Apple had included one of those and also made it the home button, that would have eased a lot of the frustration that I've had using the 10. And that brings us to the final and, in my opinion, the biggest flaw of the iPhone 10, which is the lack of the home button. The home button has been on every iPhone ever created, and it was one of the best things about the design of the iPhone. Everybody knew how it worked and they'd grown used to it over the past decade, and it was so simple that even somebody who has never seen a smartphone before could figure it out within minutes. So that was one of my biggest concerns when rumors of an all-screen iPhone started popping up. I wondered, what are they gonna do with the home button? Are they gonna put it on the back? Are they gonna incorporate it into the power button? But I never thought that they would just get rid of it completely. But that's exactly what they did. The first problem that stems from the lack of a home button is screenshotting. On the old iPhones, you just press the power button and the home button at the same time, but now on the iPhone 10, you press the volume button and the power button at the same time, which wouldn't be a problem if I didn't happen to accidentally press these buttons together all the time. I've probably taken over 100 accidental screenshots since I first got the 10. And I know it's not a major problem, I could easily go in and delete them all, but it is really annoying to have to deal with that on an almost daily basis. But some problems that are much more serious than the lack of a home button are the newly implemented gestures that are now used to navigate the phone. I tried to go into using an iPhone 10 with an open mind, willing to give these new gestures a chance to see if they can actually replace the experience of using a home button. But after 2 months of daily use, I found the gestures to result in a much slower and clunkier experience. And I thought this was strange because Apple is a company that strives for simplicity in almost every one of its products, but the gestures on the iPhone 10 make it so much more unintuitive and difficult to get used to that I truly believe this is not the direction Apple's flagship should be headed in for future years. So for example, one of the things that's much more complicated and difficult to get used to with the gestures on the iPhone 10 is multitasking. On other iPhones, it's simple. You just double click the home button and you can see all your apps that are open, and you can get rid of them by simply sliding up. But now you have this unusual gesture where you have to go up and to the right to access multitasking, but you have to do it at just the right angle or else it'll simply slide to the previous application that you were using. Also, to get rid of previous applications, you now have to press and hold one of the windows for a second or two, and only then will it allow you to slide apps up to get rid of them, which will add an extra couple of seconds or so whenever you go to do this. But the most common gesture used on the 10 is just to slide up from the bottom to return to the home screen. And this one was pretty easy to get used to, and aside from the awkward little bar at the bottom of each application showing you that you can slide up to go home, I don't really have a problem with it. But what I am pretty annoyed with is their solution to relocating the control center. The control center used to be accessed by sliding up from the bottom, but because that's now the action to return to the home screen, Apple had to move it somewhere else, so you now access it by swiping down from the top right corner of the screen. So now there are two gestures assigned to the top of the screen, and you have to remember that the right one is for the control center and the left one is for the notification drawer. And I still accidentally slide down the wrong one on a daily basis. I'm somebody who's willing to give new things a shot, but I think that anybody can see that no matter which way you look at it, navigating around the iPhone 10 is much more difficult than using older iPhones. And as I mentioned earlier, older iPhones were great because you could hand one to somebody who's never seen one before and they could figure it out on their own within minutes. But I don't think that's true with the iPhone 10. At the end of the day, I guess I would say that I'm a little confused as to who Apple is targeting with this new flagship. This is their most expensive phone, starting at $1,000, but it overcomplicates the most basic tasks, which is what made me decide to want to sell it. I love the cameras, I love the display, I love the performance, but if I have to use a clunky and awkward UI every day, then I would rather just go back to the 7. So thank you guys so much for watching. I know this video turned out to be a little bit more of a rant than I intended, but I feel like I needed to get my message across as to why I'm a little disappointed in the iPhone 10. Anyways, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe for some more content coming soon. Thanks.